Good evening. We're here for a workshop on the comprehensive plan implementation. Take it away, Doug and David.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. So I will just start by giving you guys the background as to why we're here. Some of you were involved when we finally got the comp plan adopted. And at that time, it was recognized that if we actually want to implement any of the ideas in this, and if you recall, there's a big implementation schedule in the back of this, we were going to need some assistance upstairs because really we are a planning department, I would say, of planning and code enforcement department of 1.5 on the planning side, and Doug being that one now, with me taking on the new responsibilities here. So we don't really have the resources or the time to really focus on doing the implementation like we'd like to. You folks were kind enough, I want to say it might have even been 2, if not 3 years ago, we got money to do something and we haven't used it. So now that we're kind of up to speed as far as staffing upstairs and being able to focus some of our energy and resources, I've asked Doug to put together some thoughts and proposals as to how we can actually implement some aspects of the plan. So, okay.
Thank you, David. So since I landed here from across the waters, I think it was clear pretty early on that there was a lot of interest based on the comprehensive plan, based on the River Island Master Plan, and talking with the planning board and some of you folks, that there was a lot of interest in looking at, say, form-based code perhaps, or some other design-related type directions. David and I had strategized and talked quite a bit about what would be a good approach to start working on that. And we had talked about form-based code. We had looked at some areas, maybe along Lincoln Street, a lot of vacant properties, opportunities to kind of embark down that road. But as we kind of kept thinking about this and then discovering that there was in fact funds still available, that we thought, well, let's broaden our net a little bit more. Instead of just focusing on form-based code, let's look at what are all the things that we're dealing with from a design standpoint. So since my time here, I've worked on some various projects that deal with the zoning ordinance that has different sections on performance standards, design issues. There's a section in the zoning ordinance that deals with site planning and design guidelines that dates back to 1991. We also have been working with the Historic Preservation Review Board, and they have a design manual that dates to 1999. So there's some dated material there. And then also discovering that when you really get down to work with developers, we really have virtually little, if any, design standards that we can really say, this is what you should be doing. Instead, we ask, you might want to do this, or you may do this, so that's not really, it's not something we can really hold anybody to. We have to negotiate on a case-by-case basis when we deal with design issues. So with that being said, we thought, well, we have the Historic Preservation Review Manual, we have the zoning ordinance, and we also, so we wanted to look at, in the comprehensive plan, excuse me, so why don't we combine all those issues and try to look at a comprehensive approach to the design standards or issues that we have out there. So that's basically what this proposal is before you, is to put together an RFP. We would want to recommend that there would be a selection committee that would help in the selection of a consultant, and that same committee could work through the process with the consultant to make sure that we have good input from various stakeholders. And besides the memo that was included in your packet, there also was a proposed scope of work that tried to outline kind of the process we envision this going through, and the things that would be updated, including possibly creating design or character districts, and that also was something that we find in the comprehensive plan recommendations. And then as far as some type of selection committee, we'd want to see the City Council have someone involved in this if possible, the Planning Board, of course, the Historic Preservation Review Board, perhaps the Finance Committee at some stage, especially during the consultant selection, And then we also want to make sure that somebody would be representing the business and development community. We want to make sure that whatever comes out of this process is going to be fair and not a burden to the development community. So we think having that membership or that involvement is going to be really helpful to make sure that they're supportive with whatever comes out of this, and then any interested citizen type of representation. So it's something that seems to come up almost on a weekly basis. We have a lot of good projects that are kind of out there being considered, and so we think it's going to be a really effective thing to be able to, at some point, develop these design standards or guidelines and put them into an implementation strategy and make the updates where necessary. Something that we want to, I think based on my experience in Auburn, I was very involved in the creation of their form-based code, and it was something that was a driving force, is to make sure that it was simple, easy to understand, and not overly burdensome. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but when you get to things like having a front door, those are the kind of things that we want to make sure there are basic standards that you would want to have in any appropriate, nice-looking development, and a certain amount of windows perhaps on the front of buildings. So I think would be able to take some lessons learned from Auburn. I'm not really convinced that form-based code is absolutely the way to go. We would suggest that this be a very open-minded process without any preconceived predictions on what would happen, but be open-minded, not being sure about if there's going to be design districts or character districts where they might be, but be open to that, be open to what level of standards. You know, we think it would be very helpful for the staff and the planning board and the Historic Preservation Review Board to have something to hang their hat on, and for developers to know going in that this is what's expected of them, and in a way that could be a simpler process and helpful to everybody, to not have to negotiate and haggle over multiple design issues on a case-by-case basis. So that's kind of the gist of what we're wanting to present to you. We're open to hear your thoughts and ideas about this, and here we are. Thanks.
So your memo, there were 3 bulleted items, or 3, in the first paragraph, the proposal.
Yes.
The last one, simplifying and improving historic preservation regulations. And are these 2 things, the design standards, the design review, is that design review related to historic preservation, or design review related to the development review? You know what I mean?
That particular bullet was one of the recommendations, pardon me, out of the comprehensive plan. I think that was speaking to looking at the historic preservation design manual,
okay,
looking at ways to simplify it, or to, right now, that's probably one of the more, because our historic districts are really frequently going to be under the domain of the National Park Service, Secretary of Interior's design standards, that's a little more important as far as design standards, but that bullet is really meant to be just one example of how design standards would help the effectiveness and predictability of design review, not only for historic districts, but wherever we decide to implement them.
I think too, when the comp plan was done, it became apparent to the consultants, because there was some focus on historic structures and whatnot. When you look at our ordinance and that article that deals with historic preservation, it's just been added to year after year after year. It's convoluted. It's not necessarily user-friendly. So when a property comes in, it's not uncommon for either Doug or I to talk to each other and go, is this building subject to some type of demolition delay? Does it need to go through historic preservation review? What are the hoops and hurdles that it has to jump through? So from an ordinance perspective as well as a design manual, there's definitely room for improvement there to make that not just easier for the public, but for staff to administer as well.
Why do we need to go outside the department with a consultant?
Frankly, we're not going to have the time to do this. between the daily operations of just, you know, phone calls, emails, public, dealing with development review, dealing with requests from the board, dealing with requests from the council, we have enough on our plate upstairs just really to keep busy. One of the things I'm trying to do here with Doug on board, given his experience, is trying to keep him out of the code enforcement side of things to some extent. For better, for worse, I was exposed to both of those things, and I would argue probably better, but at the same time, we weren't getting a lot of the zoning and land use things that we've been talking about for some time. We weren't just getting them done. Doug does have that capacity to get a lot of those things done that we've kind of had on the back burner. But if we're going to undertake something significant like this, where we need to get some public outreach involved, someone in managing the project, it's going to take enough staff's time just to oversee the project. I think some of you could attest to that just through the comp plan process and the amount of time staff was involved in that, never mind having a consultant on board.
At the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that we were allocated some money a few years back.
Yep.
How much money, and what was the source of that?
$100,000, and I would have to ask Heather the source.
It is bond proceeds.
And it's already been bonded?
Yes.
And during the presentation, I heard that there's a nuance between form-based code and design standards. What would be the difference? Because I got the impression that form-based code may be a little overreaching, not necessarily overreaching, but a little more with potency than the former.
Right, that's a great question. Form-based code is, on one whole level, a different approach to land use regulations, where it tends to, the direction is more based on the form of development as opposed to the use, and it's implemented through more graphics and simple prescriptions of these are the things that, the elements of a design or a project that should be addressed and how it's going to be addressed. I've seen many examples when we were looking at Auburn's form-based code. It can get really in the weeds and very busy, too busy in my opinion. You get into color, into overly controlling materials, those kind of things. As compared to design standards, again, design standards or design guidelines, those are two distinct type of things, and they are more in the realm of zoning regulations. That's where those type of things are found. Design standards are going to be more specific. Like I mentioned, it's going to say buildings must be no greater than 10 feet from the property line, or those kind of things. It's more verbiage, but it still gets to the same end as far as saying specifically what you should and should not do, shall or shall not do. Design guidelines are more flexible. They can be used in different ways. I've done quite a bit of research based on American Planning Association guidelines on design review processes. That's where we're saying we want to go into this with open eyes. What's going to be the best thing for Lewiston? And it may vary. You could have combinations of the elements of form-based code. I think using graphics is very helpful for developers and the public to understand what these design standards might mean. But at the same time, you could also have some parts of it be design standards and then mixing design guidelines depending on the circumstances. So we want to be open and, again, find the best solution to meet the goals of this project, which is to make the best looking project, the highest quality, but make it simple and not overly burdensome.
We're sensitive to any projects. You know, a lot of times, maybe a better looking project adds cost, and we're sensitive to that because we don't necessarily want to stymie development because all of a sudden the standards are this high and they can't be met unless you have a, you know, incredible budget. But we can do better, quite frankly. I think, and there's nothing there to get us there, I guess, as Doug suggested. It's just suggestions and recommendations at this point. If somebody wants to come in with a heinous building, we're going to give them approval. We're going to let them do this. And then it needs to be predictable. Doug mentioned that as well. And if there's one thing that we hear from consultants all the time, they just want to know, what do I need to do to get approval? They don't like the uncertainty. So we need to be sensitive to that when we go through this process as well. They just, you know, a lot of times, they don't even care if there's a million hoops, as long as they know if I do a million hoops, I'll get approval at the end. We're not suggesting a million hoops, but this needs to be a predictable process as well.
Well, I know that we have trouble with code enforcement as far as inspecting all of the apartments and making sure everything is safe and just the nitty-gritty. And so I'm wondering if, I don't know about these things, but it just seems like maybe we're trying to overthink this code thing. And maybe it's best to take it one step at a time when new things come up, and pretty much, I mean, let the city grow. I wouldn't mind if you stepped in on this, because I know you have some background on that.
Yeah, no, I think you make a point. I think you're going to see some recommendations from the group working on rental registration about some of the code issues. And frankly, what I think the big impetus was is how can we do this simpler and more cost-effective, and with the kind of staff that we have and things like that. So this, I think, is a little different. I mean, and I agree with you on the housing issue. It's one of our major issues. But I think, Doug, it's improving the quality of affordable housing through form-based code. You know, it's like, that's a I mean, there's many, many, many ways to do that. And I think that, you know, being a planning director for 15 years during some of these, when these plans were developed, I mean, the design standards there, one of the things that Russell Wright, rest in peace, did was show graphic examples and saying, because sometimes it's like pornography, you don't know until you see it. You know what I mean? You can't, like, you know, you can't describe it in a sentence or a word or a paragraph. So here's our buildings, this is what we like, this is the patterns. And I think that even some of the work along Lisbon Street has adopted some form-based code stuff because it's good practice. It's not necessarily required. And I think that negotiation process. So I think this undertaking is good. I think that I support getting outside resources because I know how tough it is to do that stuff with everything else on your plate. And, you know, hopefully we'll be asking for another planner again this year. And I'm going to be supporting that because I think that's necessary. And we could do some more of that in-house with more staff. But implementation, to me, I was excited when I saw this on the agenda because, you know, we spent a lot of time in a comprehensive plan. Now, you know, and I think we developed a good one, and now we need to begin to implement it. So it's, I'm excited that, because it's not something that wants to sit on the shelf anyway. And I think that the discussions that we have that refer to some of the language there, giving us some good direction. And I think you know, there was good citizen input. We had, I think, an outstanding consultant team. There was a lot of input from the planning board, a lot of input from the city council. So I think that's a document that can stand on its own, and therefore we need to kind of use it as a direction. So, but the other thing, I think either you made reference, I was reading about zoning from the 20s, and, you know, to me, planning is not a real, it's a doing type of profession. It's not a theoretical or reading or whatever. And, you know, some of the principles that came from the early 20s when they were implementing stuff is really what has forced municipalities like us or other parts of Maine and other across the United States to have sprawl, and we talked about that before the meeting, and auto-centric design, and, you know, all these things. And this is a beginning to reverse some of that. And I think that I think developers need things to be clear. They need certainty when they invest in something to say, you know, like, if I do this, will I get approval? Predictability and a lot of those things. And I know we've got expanded review authority, which helps to, you know, shorten the time that gets even some large projects through. And I think I think a clearer code will help everyone, both the planning board, you know, and the developer teams and consultants and also the city council too to kind of, so it's a big challenge. And I think the housing issues in downtown are, you know, we are we have the oldest, one of the oldest housing stock in the state, if not the oldest, right? We also have the oldest population in the state, you know, in the union. So we've got some challenges. I mean, we've got older people, we've got older housing stock. How do we redevelop things? And I like the emphasis on infill. I like the emphasis on, and one of the tenets that I adopted when I was a planner is that often it's not what you do in a certain location, it's how you do it. It's really, you know, zoning can go so far to kind of, you know, create the kind of cities we want. But in some cases, it's how you do something, how you present it. And that's really what design standards are about. That's what form-based codes are about, is the hows. Now, someone who's canvassed a lot of houses, there's a lot of front doors on houses that never, ever get used. Whenever there's a big snowstorm, go look to see where they're shoveled, you know what I mean? Very rarely. However, it presents a certain consistency and ambiance of residential life, you know. So sometimes it's not even utilization, but it's like presence and what it looks like that's important. So, you know, so sometimes you got to have a combination of all those things, utility as well as how things are viewed. And I also think that the biggest challenge will remain is this autocentric. And I think you had it that for every errand, you got to get in a car and drive someplace. In most places in this community, except the downtown. So, how do we overcome some of those barriers? At the same time, our public transit system isn't really, you know, meeting the needs of the community, and it's grown, but that's because of the way we've built our cities. It's not really, it's hard to create a transit system without density. And Zach was saying, can we find another word for density? Because density is one of those words where people just shut their brains off. They're against it. You know, we can't increase density. We can't increase, regardless of where it is, even in the downtown. And when density is one of those critical components of affordability, better utilization of infrastructure, better ability to do mass transit, a lot of different things. It's certainly a good thing. The other thing is that I think that the zone, you know, the world has changed considerably, even since the time I was planning director. I mean, people, you know, don't necessarily want to have a car. Many younger people do not. That's not something they want. And it's like, I want to get around other ways. I want to live in a place where I can walk to work, those types of things. And that's also helpful to kind of move toward these more form-based codes and redevelopment of areas where there is infrastructure. And it's cost-effective as well. I mean, we've got, in the downtown, we've got lots of utilization of our infrastructure. And we build out the suburbs, it costs us a lot of money in roads that we've got to maintain. And, we know we're not doing a great job on that anyway. Again, I think this is a long discussion. I'd love to participate in the process, so I'm going to throw my hat in. There's others that could contribute. I know Zach's a big, fan of this type of work as well. So.
So I just wanted to thank you. I think it's smart anytime we can unify all of these plans and ordinances and ideas that we have everywhere. I do appreciate that you put the timeline as approximately 12 months. It seems you are hedging your bets a little bit. What is that? Is that based on other communities that have done a similar sort of consultant process? And what are those communities? I'm curious.
So I'll just speak first to the comp plan process here in Lewiston. And I'm sensitive to that because that was supposed to take a year and a half, and it took 3 years.
Yeah.
So, I suggested to Doug, be conservative with what you have in there for numbers. I mean, some of this is going to be based upon what the consultant thinks that they can do it in. And even then, that past experience was the consultant thought he could do it in a year and a half. And because of many reasons, all the public input, the amount of time the board and the council spent on it, it just took a heck of a lot longer than anybody anticipated. So I don't know how long it took over in Auburn for a similar type of form-based code process.
It had its own, some staffing issues that kind of got in the way of making solid progress, but it was about a 1.5 to 2-year process. This is based on an estimation of what's possible. And it's always such a laborious process to get the RFP out and get the consultant selected. That's 3 months, maybe 4 months. So that's just getting started. So you take up quite a bit of time just to get the engine running. So it may be overly optimistic to do 12 months, but that's the goal. And I certainly strive for any work that I've ever done to if I can have any impact on the meetings and the process, is to have very tight agendas, have a specific process of what you plan on accomplishing at each meeting, and you meet those objectives and goals, and you just keep plowing forward. You're building consensus. So that's the best estimate we can come up with. But we do not want this to be labored and take a long time. That's a killer on keeping your momentum going for an important project.
I can definitely appreciate that, and appreciate the content of you have to set a goal to meet it. So it would be great if we could keep it to that. I think the only other thing is that I'm thinking of in this process is, you know, everything tends to have budgetary implications afterwards. So I think, you know, setting up the start of it so that you are able to bring those budget concerns forward at the budget time. I can't imagine what they would be here, but if there are any budgetary implications, making sure that they're developed well
what
ahead.
we've learned over the years too, or at least in my tenure here, is, you know, we might have $100,000. We're not necessarily going to go into it looking to spend $100,000 up front, because we need a cushion for whatever is going to happen. If there's another aspect of implementation after this plan is done or something, or I don't know, we're this close and the consultant needs another $1,000 to make something happen, we need to have some type of buffer there to be smart about it. So
I'm glad you're
the goal isn't necessarily to use all 100,000, even though we have it available to us. What can we do this for, and make sure we have enough to play with at the end.
Right. And I would just add, the project budget should include printing materials, and that's probably the other part, is just when you get to the final product, there's going to be a cost involved in whatever the product is going to be, and inserting it into the zoning ordinance. Just some peripheral costs on that, but we want to make sure we include that in the overall project budget.
And your point's well taken too, in that, at least, you know, again, since I've been here, because I've heard it from other people, and I think Council Lewiston mentioned it, you know, the plan's sitting on a shelf and whatnot, and you can go into my office and there, I just found a plan for Ed from 1991, and it kills me when you read it. I mean, if I found that plan a few weeks earlier, I could have saved the rental registration committee probably 2 months worth of meetings, because in 1991, apparently the city had an identical conversation, and not much came of it. So if we can try to be conscious about trying to implement these plans, because you folks dedicate money towards this stuff, and it does no good when a lot of people spend the time and money and effort on this stuff, and then if we don't implement any of it, I don't know, it's just frustrating to me too, because I'm like, yeah, great, I'm glad the process was done, but let's actually do something with it, so.
So I would just second, I think, a lot of what Councilor Lewiston said, and just say that I'm excited to have this conversation. I think form-based code, I was on the comprehensive plan committee, and, you know, that was 2014, I think we started those conversations. And I know that the planning board was talking about form-based code prior to the comprehensive plan. So this is a conversation that's kind of long overdue. And then just in terms of implementation, you know, I think you made a good point, Dave, and that is that, you know, we have this plan and we have this really dynamic plan, right? I mean, we purposefully chose to do it in that way, where we had a lot of community input. And I think that it's important for us to remember that implementation phase and putting things in the budget and making sure that, you know, when we're looking at the LCIP, that there's funding in there to implement different pieces of this. And so, you know, there's the cost, I guess, with the hiring of the consultant, which you know, we have the money for. But I would suggest that any money we have left over from that then gets put towards that implementation phase for whatever comes out of this.
And the council's been great, like, the Riverfront Master Plan is a great example. I mean, you folks have continually put money into the LCIP of a certain amount to, you know, make improvements as we go down there. And this actually will touch upon that too, because one of the recommendations out of the Riverfront Master Plan was to insist on better quality down there with respect to buildings and new improvements. So, I mean, we're tackling that plan from another perspective as well. So, you know, again, you're absolutely right. We try to be conscious to go forward in the LCIP to make sure there is some funds in there.
And just lastly, another thing that I find most exciting about form-based code is the idea of design with the sense of place in mind. And I think that in a city like Lewiston, that really sort of gives us an opportunity to respect sort of the heritage and architectural culture that we have here. So.
Councilor Bengill?
So I'll make it real quick. I agree with a lot of what Councilor Lyson said, and oddly enough, we were speaking about it prior to the meeting. I would love to be involved with setting this up in any way that I can. This and parking issues is sort of what got me in this spot with the comprehensive plan. But just a couple things. Affordable housing usually always relates back to apartments, so you know, something to keep a focus on is making sure that the homeowner doesn't get lost in the shuffle of this. And as Councilor Cloutier was saying, with the opportunity to be able to look at form-based code, allows us to try and address the issue or the image issues that Lewiston has. I remember reading an article in the paper a few years ago about how a business wanted to come in, put a lot of pressure in and being able to, and then Dave actually had a conversation of, well, hey, I saw you put this up, you know, in this other town. Can we do that? No, we don't want to, and if we have to, we're not going to do it. The building is still there, and it doesn't look that good. And you can drive 20 minutes across town into another city, and this building's gorgeous, and there's nothing around it. There's a house and a sand pit, and this building is gorgeous. Ours is in the smack dab middle of a residential area. Coincidentally, there's a small sand pit next to it, and it looks like a brown paper bag. So this will give us an opportunity to say, I'm sorry, these are our standards. You want to come and do business here? This is what we want you to look like. Please respect our city. Yeah, thank you. I'm very excited for this. So,
Just another quick comment on the time and the cost. The Brookings Institute several years ago did a study across disciplines and said projects from their conception, from the day you say, this is what we predict and how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost, literally, it was like 2.4 times as long and 2.4 times as much money. So sitting on the Finance Committee, I'd love the consultant. I mean, a lot of times the bids come in based upon how much money's in the pot. Do you know what I mean? So I think we should be careful with that 100 grand. Maybe we should split that into implementation and this first phase. I mean, this first phase is part of implementation, don't get me wrong. But again, I agree that, you know, we might be prudent as we move forward. And again, to have some of that money in case the consultant needs some additional, but we can certainly use it, be it, you know, creating the documents that we need to do for form-based code or others, and in simple ways. It's, you know, we say simple, it's probably the hardest thing to do, you know. I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time. So sometimes it's like really, you know, and again, we've done a great comp plan, and I've been involved, I think, in 3 or 4 comp plans in my life here in Lewiston. Again, I think it's time to kind of break the mold and do something bold, because I think that's what's necessary in this modern world. So, good luck.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Doug.
Councilor Lewiston?
Yes. I want to make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Section 405(6)(c) to discuss real estate negotiations of which the premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the city.
All in favor? Excellent. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We're going to start tonight's meeting with some recognition, and the city clerk has a proclamation to read.
Yes, we have a recognition for City Arborist Steve Murch, who was the recipient of the 2018 Healthy Androscoggin Leadership Award. City of Lewiston, Maine proclamation recognizing City Arborist Steve Murch. Whereas City Arborist Steve Murch is a City of Lewiston employee who makes a difference within our community, and whereas he was recently presented with a Healthy Androscoggin Leadership Award for his assistance with their built environment projects over the last 3 years, to include the Traveling Story Walk project, and whereas Steve's positive energy for community collaborations is stellar, and he enthusiastically embraces opportunities to enhance Lewiston in ways ranging from trail improvements to better signage, and whereas his creativity and vision have also been praised by Healthy Androscoggin as he understands and acts upon the knowledge that public health needs can certainly benefit from the input of public works, and whereas individuals like Steve Murch shine a positive light on the city of Lewiston and remind residents of our many services and the dedicated employees who provide them. Whereas now, therefore, I, Shane D. Bouchard, Mayor of the City of Lewiston, do hereby officially recognize City Arborist Steve Murch for consistently demonstrating what exemplary public service looks like. Dated this 4th day of December 2018, signed by Mayor Shane D. Bouchard.
All right. Come on up, Steve. Picture time. Council, can you stand up? Close in.
Stand up, close in.
Right in front of everybody.
We've never done this with anyone else, so you should feel very special.
Very fortunate individual here.
No, keep the handshake going. All right. That's how they're all going to be done from now on. But before we go too much further, and Steve, before you leave, we're going to have Katie Boss say a few words from Healthy Androscoggin.
If I can add a couple.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the opportunity to once again sing Steve's praises. He's been an excellent partner for us at Healthy Androscoggin. So I wanted to actually share the remarks that I gave at our annual meeting. If you'll all bear with me, it's a little bit long, but it was worth it, and I think that it really honors Steve and everything that he's done for us as an organization. So I'm going to jump right in by telling you about a study that was done in Boston University in 2016 that showed that residents of the Back Bay neighborhood in Boston have a life expectancy that is 33 years younger than residents of Roxbury. This is another neighborhood that is only 2 miles away. In Back Bay, the average lifespan is 92 compared to a meager 59 in Roxbury. This study looked at the connection between poor health and poverty and how environmental and social factors contribute to lifespan. This and other studies have showed that your zip code may actually be a more accurate indicator of your health than your genetic code. Now, there are numerous factors at play when you're looking at what influences the health of a community, but one of the more critical determinants of health rests within the built environment. The term built environment often conjures up images of rivers, forests, and the natural world, but this concept is referring to the physical structures and the spaces that make up a community. Our homes, sidewalks, streets, and open spaces, and how they are knit together has a significant impact on our health. The built environment determines how you engage with the world around you, and often supersedes personal choice. If there are interconnected, well-lit, and safe walking routes in your community, you're more likely to walk and gain all of the health benefits associated with increased physical activity. If it's not safe or easy to walk, you won't. If you live in a community that prioritizes bike lane infrastructure and bike safety education, you're more likely to bike, improving your health and contributing to your community's overall culture of health and wellness. If it's not safe or easy to bike, you won't. How we design the built environment holds tremendous potential for addressing many of our greatest public health concerns, including obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, asthma, and social inequities. Now that I've painted the picture for why it's important to think about our physical environment when we're talking about health, I want to tell you about Steve Murch, who you, of course, already know. Steve is the city arborist for the city of Lewiston, and he has been a quiet force behind all of our built environment projects over the last 3 years. Together, we collaborated on the Traveling Story Walk project, an initiative that places the pages of a nature-based children's story along a walking trail. Story Walk has been at the Androscoggin Riverside Trail in Lewiston, in windows of shops in downtown Lisbon Street, and will be installed permanently behind McMahon Elementary School in 2019. We work together to increase awareness of and access to walking trails that are located within a tight radius of downtown Lewiston, and we created better signage to increase usage of these trails. We also work together to create Edible Lisbon Street, the series of planter boxes on Lisbon Street offering free produce and raising awareness about the importance of access to good local food. Chrissy Adamowitz, a former Healthy Androscoggin employee who worked on these initiatives, articulated it best when she said, "Steve's positivity around community collaborations is an energizing force. He knows that public works has the ability to change our quality of life for the better, and he acts on that knowledge." No great public health challenges can be overcome alone. Everything we do in support of the health of our community, we do as a team of partners. Steve's leadership, vision, creativity, and collaboration make him an exemplary partner in this work, and it is my extreme honor to present Healthy Androscoggin's Leadership Award to Steve Murch.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Steve, I don't know if you remember when you first, how long you've been with the city?
20 years now.
Yeah. So it was 20 years ago, when I was the planning director, and they hired you, the arborist. The city, first time I think you had a city arborist. And the first thing you did was, because there has been such neglect to the trees, all you did, I think, for the first couple of years was cut trees down. Do you know what I mean? And people were saying, "The hell, we hire an arborist, and all he's doing is cutting trees down," you know? So, but it was, you were tending to that forest, and obviously now you're able to do a lot more things, and we certainly appreciate your service over time, and I'm glad we're nurturing trails and trees and stuff, and there's probably a lot of trees still left to be tended in this community, but other people can do that as well, so congratulations, Steve.
All right. We'll now move into public comment period, where any member of the public may make comments about Lewiston City Government on an item not on tonight's agenda. Okay, real quick one. Roll call.
All roll call votes for this meeting will begin with the Councilor of Ward 6.
Consent agenda.
There are 3 items on the consent agenda. Item number 1, order authorizing execution of a municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 42 Charles Street. Number 2, appointment to the Lewiston Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. And number 3, authorization to accept transfer of forfeiture funds.
So,
Second.
Councilor from Ward 4. Okay, Councilor LaJoy, second by Councilor Lyson. I'll get my wheels here. You have some, Councilor Cludier?
Can we remove the Charles Street item number 1 from the consent agenda, please?
We can. Consent agenda as amended.
Yes, so the consent agenda will be items 2 and 3.
Okay. Call the roll.
Councilor from Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 1.
Item number 1, to approve the order authorizing execution of a municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 42 Charles Street. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor Beam. Comments on the council? Yeah.
So I'm going to recuse myself from this vote because I know the parties.
Public? Council? Call the roll.
Mayor?
Oh, sorry.
Did have a question on this. Looks like it's older items, so the newer items were probably paid on time, and they didn't go into
Yes, that's
into
correct.
lien status?
They have not formally gone through matured lien status.
Okay. And is it because the property is being sold at this point that this
That's correct.
is being addressed?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought, okay.
Okay. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
and Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 4.
Item number 4, public hearing on applications for a new liquor license and special amusement permit for live entertainment for LA Public Theater, 31 Maple Street. Requested action, to authorize the city clerk's office to approve a new liquor license application and special amusement permit for LA Public Theater, 31 Maple Street.
So moved.
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Marcotte. Council? Public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 5.
Item number 5, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Big Mike's Smokehouse, 838 Lisbon Street. Requested action, to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to Big Mike's Smokehouse, 838 Lisbon Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Cloutier, seconded by Counselor Ray. Council, public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 6.
Item number 6, ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Article 15, medical marijuana, distribution and cultivation, to remove references to registered dispensaries and clarify that the city has not opted in under state law to authorize registered caregiver retail stores, registered dispensaries, marijuana testing facilities, or marijuana manufacturing facilities. Requested action, that 1, the proposed ordinance amendment to remove references to registered dispensaries and clarify that the city has not opted in under state law to authorize registered caregiver retail stores, registered dispensaries, marijuana testing facilities, or marijuana manufacturing facilities be further amended as proposed, and that following a public hearing, it receive final passage by a roll call vote.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Counselor LaJoy, seconded by Counselor Cloutier. Counselor Lyson.
Ed, could you, I mean, if someone read this or didn't understand what's going on, it looked like we're totally be without these types of facilities, right? But could you kind of characterize what has happened since the adoption of
Sure. Obviously, the city's original marijuana legislation was adopted a number of years ago when only medical marijuana was authorized in the state. More recently, recreational marijuana has been authorized, and the whole medical marijuana statute has been completely revised. Those new statutes effectively will go into effect on December 13th of this year. One of the requirements of those laws is that for any type of facility other than a caregiver facility under medical marijuana to be authorized in the city would have to take action after December 13th when the new law goes into effect. So this ordinance first eliminates all references in our existing ordinances to dispensaries, because I didn't want people to be confused looking at our ordinance and assume that the city had authorized them when we hadn't. And second, it makes clear that we have to take future action to authorize any of the facilities that are not currently allowed. It will allow any facility that's up and operating as of December 13th and is permitted and operating to continue to operate. The reason for the recommended amendment is that the way this was originally written, it was under the assumption everybody had a permit, was already operating. Some people who have applied for permits have not yet received their permits or gone into operation. So we just wanted to make sure that the period from November 20th to December 13th remained open for them to complete their work, so that by the 13th, if they're up and operating, they can be continue as grandfathered use after that. Once we've adopted all of this, we will have to come back next year and begin the process of determining to what extent we want to allow marijuana facilities, particularly recreational marijuana facilities in the community, under what circumstances and what locations.
Thank you.
Council Marcotte?
This, in effect, is the second reading. It simply has the addendum.
Yes.
Okay.
And this change actually is a beneficial change. So in terms, it prevents people who might otherwise get caught in something inadvertently from being caught in that.
Okay, so the second reading can be amended?
Yes.
It won't require an extra?
Correct, as long as it's not a quote-unquote substantive amendment.
Okay.
To the public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 7.
Item number 7, ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 18, Building and Building Regulations, Article 3, Property Maintenance Code, Chapter 3, General Requirements, Weeds. Requested action, that the proposed ordinance amendment to extend the existing prohibition on tall weeds in certain zoning districts to additional districts receive final passage by a roll call vote.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Cloutier, seconded by Councilor Ray. Discussion on the council.
I would just like to personally object to putting marijuana and weeds right next to each other again.
I
Mr.
love that
Barrett.
he keeps doing it.
This will always be known as the
Feels
Councilor
personal at
Ray
this point.
Amendment. Yes.
This is the weed ordinance. Public. And back to the council. Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Word 5?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 8.
Item number 8, ordinance amending Chapter 70, Traffic and Vehicles of the Code of Ordinances by adding a new section 70-179, on-street parking by permit only. Requested action, that the proposed ordinance amendment to add a new section 70-179 to Chapter 70 of the Code of Ordinances, Traffic and Vehicles, on-street parking by permit only, receive first passage by a roll call vote, and that the public hearing be continued to the next regularly scheduled city council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Cloutier, seconded by Councilor Ray. Discussion.
Was permitted parking looked at, I know we have a parking study that's it's
Yes.
going on. Is that an issue that was looked at by that? I don't know.
Do you remember on Canal Street in that area, Dennis?
Yes, Canal Street was reviewed.
Not specific, but, because I know we don't really allow permitted parking anywhere in the city, right?
We have not on the street. This would be the first time we have done that. There has been some potential discussions about possibly doing that at some point in the future as a way to meet some of the parking requirements for the Bates Mill project. But this would be the first time.
Because I know.
You could probably, you could make an argument that we could have accomplished the same thing if we had designated these as delivery zones, except that
Oh, loading zones.
loading zones, except that they may be parked there for longer than a typical loading zone.
Because we talked about that to resolve the Bates College issue too, the neighborhood issues, maybe looking at permitted parking.
Yeah, there are communities that have parking by permit only on street for residential areas
So
that are
I
impacted.
think, but this is specific, this here. to
This is
those two.
specific to 2 spaces that are designed to support a new restaurant that's looking for
Delivery service.
Right.
And these spaces are not in high demand, given their location.
Thank you.
Councilor Marcotte.
When I hear specific, this change to ordinance is not specific to a spot, correct?
Correct, but we will, yes, this is a general change to the ordinance. We will be coming back at the next meeting to designate 2 spots on Canal Street and to set the rate that will be paid for those spots.
Okay.
Okay. To the public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
No.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
and Ward 5.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6 to 1.
Item number 9.
Item number 9, resolve adopting personnel policies for the City of Lewiston and rescinding various master policies to be replaced. Requested action, to approve the resolve adopting personnel policies for the City of Lewiston and rescinding various master policies to be replaced.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Cloutier, seconded by Counselor Ray. Discussion on the council?
So Ed, do you want to just give a overview for?
Sure, I'll give you a brief summary here. What we have basically tried to do is to, over the years, we have adopted a number of policies that affect our employees at various times, in various places, in various ways. So we had a very rudimentary, what I'll call set of personnel rules and regulations, and we had a whole set of administrative policies that have been subsequently adopted. As a result, things are all spread around. So what we're trying to do is bring that all together into a single document so that we'll have one consolidated place for our employees and our managers and supervisors to go. In general, we are not making any significant substantive changes. We are pulling things together, getting rid of stuff. We're trying to match current practice, because sometimes current practice and policy don't always coincide, and trying to get rid of stuff that no longer applies, and in a couple of areas trying to clarify things where there was some confusion. So that's basically what we've tried to do here. There is one error in the document. Somewhere along the line in the thousands of track changes that we did, one change got reversed. On page 14, it indicates that employees can be paid for a maximum of 80 days in sick leave time when they retire, should be 90.
90.
And that change it was already made, was it made already?
Yes, the city council approved that on December 5th, 2017.
And that was to bring non-union employees into the same system that union employees had. So it was corrected and then uncorrected or something. So basically, it's not really a substantive change, it's just pulling everything together in a single document.
Okay. Council? Public? Back to the council, Councilor Ray.
Hi. So I know I was one of the folks who sent along hundreds of track changes, and that was mostly addressing how we legally have talk about spouses and domestic partners versus how we talk about it in our policies. Was that able to be resolved?
I think what we,
Yeah, currently the city has not adopted a domestic spouse or a domestic partner policy. So once the council, if that's something that they want to consider putting on the agenda, once we do that, we can incorporate and bring that back and incorporate those within the policy. But for our health insurance and other benefit providers, the council needs to specifically adopt the policy first.
I would like to look at that personally. I don't want to speak for the council, but as a singular counselor,
idea.
I would definitely love to talk about that.
Okay. Anyone else? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Agenda item number 10.
Item number 10, order authorizing the city administrator to approve and execute documents for issuing and accepting easements associated with the Bates College STEM building construction. Requested action, to approve the order authorizing the city administrator to approve and execute documents for issuing and accepting easements associated with the Bates College STEM building construction.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Councilor LaJoy, second by Councilor Lyson. Councilor Ray?
I would like to recuse myself from this vote.
Councilor Cloutier?
I'm going to recuse myself from this vote as well as an employee of the college.
Okay. The college employee is out. Here we go. Any other discussion on the council? Questions, comments, concerns? The public?
there are people from
The
Bates here if you want to see the bigger maps and everything. I think everything's included in your
maps.
packet.
If anyone has a hankering for a presentation, you get a couple of no's, couple of
I'd like to see a presentation.
And Councilor Marcotte says you guys are up. You guys.
He's got to get a life somehow.
You have 2 minutes. No.
I think that's about all we need. We didn't plan, knowing how full the agenda was, we chose to keep it very succinct here. So I'm Chris Streifel, Bates College, project manager for the STEM project. And I'm joined here by Michael Hinchcliffe with Payette Architects, the architect for the project. Yeah, thank you for fitting us into this really packed schedule, although the way you guys are mowing it down tonight, I guess it was moving very quickly. We're here tonight to request approval to develop and execute easements with the city administration and to implement changes to the right-of-way surrounding our project site on Campus Avenue and to make associated modifications to construct the new science building that we recently went through the planning board process for. We were here in September, workshopped the project. I think we went through it fairly in detail, so if there is other questions about the project, we can certainly answer them. I wasn't going to spend a lot of time talking about the specifics of the building. We did get a planning board approval on October 31st, and during the process since we workshopped, we've been working with, through the Public Works Department to develop the easement language, to develop the street modifications, and work with the various other city departments, police department, and so forth. And I believe that I speak correctly when I say that they support our application that we have before you tonight. Before I turn it over to Michael, who can maybe walk through any of the details that we need to talk about, I would just bring up the issue of parking, which is always an issue that brings a lot of attention and is always a topic that people want to talk about. So from experience, we know this is a hot topic. The project, as we have acknowledged during the workshop, will have an impact on the parking in the immediate vicinity of the project. We will be changing the type of off-street parking that's there, as well as having impacts to the on-street. The net gain, I think we have in there, is a gain of 9 spaces as a result of this project. We also know that during construction, we will have issues and impacts on the parking around the specific project and around the campus as a whole. We understand that, and we're working on a number of different plans to address that. So during construction, the Nickel Street lot that we currently have on campus that holds 18 spaces will be shut down. We're looking at various ways that we can provide additional temporary parking on campus for faculty and staff that will be displaced by that. I think furthermore, perhaps at least as important of an issue is the activity that will be brought to campus as a result of the construction. So there will be, at times, a large number of tradespeople that will be accessing the site and will need parking. There isn't a lot of parking on the site. In fact, there will be almost no parking on the specific site during construction. So we are looking at ways that we can either lease or create temporary parking to handle that influx of additional cars. Furthermore, we will have language in all the subcontracts that will be issued by Consigli, our construction manager, that will require tradespeople to park in designated areas only. So we'll have some leverage that makes it a little more, gives us more control over where that parking impact will be felt the most. So I think it's also worth noting that we do have a active transportation committee on campus. It's made up of faculty, staff, and a liaison from the Lewiston Police Department. This group meets regularly, several times a year, to talk about a lot of things transportation related, but one of the consistent topics that we have on every agenda is to hear from the Lewiston Police Department about any complaints or concerns that they have received from the local community, as well as our own Bates Security Department. I think we've been doing that since the completion of the Residence Hall project in the same vicinity, and I think that we found it to be a very effective mechanism to understand what the issues are and to respond to them. So I know that doesn't cover every concern and every detail, but parking is something we're very aware of. We know that other people are as well, and we're taking steps to address it both during and after this project.
Just so I can get a visual in my head, the construction site is between Bardwell and Nichols?
Correct.
It doesn't extend any further than that? And you're not cul-de-sacing any of the roads in the process?
That is correct. We are not cul-de-sacing any of the roads.
That's all I wanted to know.
Councilor, you're actually out of this.
Can I make a comment?
I guess so.
Okay,
You're public.
I just
I'll call
wanted
you
to
public
say,
for now.
I appreciate that you are addressing parking after it came up at the planning board meeting, and as a new resident of Bardwell, and seeing cars coming down my road to park in front of my driveway sometimes, I really appreciate that that's being considered as a part of this.
Councilor Lyson?
Yeah, construction schedule to see when you anticipate starting and how long it's going to last. So
We anticipate breaking ground this coming spring, March, April timeframe. Construction will run through the fall of 2020.
So we're talking about almost a year and a half.
A little over 2 years by the time it's all said and done. I'm sorry, 2021.
2021, okay. Okay.
Okay, and this is probably for David. What was the planning board vote on the? Unanimous vote. Okay, that's easy enough. All right. Anyone here from the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Council from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Sorry.
Motion passed by a vote of 6 to 0.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
And we have a report from our school committee representative.
Yes, so the school committee has not met since November 19th, and we had a council meeting after, but the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee of the school committee is currently doing an online survey in addition to a number of listening sessions that they hosted about standards-based diplomas and learning. The state legislature in their last session decided to make standards-based diplomas optional, and so Lewiston Public Schools is trying to decide on a direction through the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee. If you would like a link to take the survey, you can email Tina Hutchinson at thutchinson@lewistonpublicschools.org. I'd be happy to share that with the whole council as well for the link, and it's been circulating on Facebook as well. We do meet tomorrow for a student disciplinary hearing.
Okay.
Question on our joint meeting with them and the legislatures on the 17th, is that
Yes.
confirmed? Okay.
It'll be Monday the 17th. We'll start at 6 o'clock, and it'll be at the school department.
So I have it as 7.
You're right, it's at 7 o'clock. I'm sorry.
So at the Dingley Building?
At the Dingley Building.
So December 17th, 7 PM, Digley Building. Great. And then the other thing I just wanted to bring up, I know a constituent, I think, reached out to all of us about some parking issues outside community dental. And so I'm just, now that we've seen parking permits on the agenda for another issue, I know we've got police looking at that. I'm just wondering if that's another option that they might consider in relation to that. And you don't have to give me an answer, I'm just saying put it on there.
Okay, we have people taking a look at that area over there. The difficulty is there are very limited spaces on Main Street. There are relatively large number of spaces on Park Street. And I think there's usually some available, but people are checking to try to make sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other business councilors may have?
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor?